Bienvenue à la conférence de presse à l'issue de notre réunion informelle. Président du Conseil européen, je vous donne la parole.
Bonjour à chacune et à chacun. Je souhaite naturellement commencer par remercier
I'd like to begin by thanking the French President for his hospitality in this magnificent setting, which is full of history, and it's also made it possible for us to work with a view to the future, particularly the future of Europe, at a moment which is a difficult one, because we are facing a war on the continent of Europe. The Versailles Declaration has been formally approved a few moments ago, and it will remain in the annals of the European projects. And there's a reason for this. For some time now, we have understood that it is essential to embark upon an agenda of sovereignty, of strategic autonomy for the European Union, to be seen reflected in its ambition to take into consideration the strengths, the advantages, what brings Europeans together, but also take a look at the fragilities that exist. We're going to try to correct and strengthen. This meeting at Versailles comes at a moment when, just 2 weeks ago, Russia embarked upon a war against Ukraine. And for 2 weeks now, the European Union has demonstrated how strong it is, how solid it is, how united it is. We've been able to come together to decide in favor of unprecedented sanctions, which have
fortement le peuple ukrainien qui se bat avec courage. Soutien sur le plan financier, sur le plan humanitaire, soutien bien sûr en termes d'accueil des réfugiés, soutien aussi, c'est une première qui traduit l'ambition d'agir sur le plan de la défense européenne au travers de la facilité qui mobilise du matériel,
which is one of peace. We've been mobilizing equipment, including military equipment, and some 500 million euros additionally has been added to the peace facility. So we're there to support Ukraine. We've also been discussing the application by Ukraine, as it was by Georgia and Moldova, and we wanted to make our point clear to our Ukrainian friends, who of course are full members of the European family, and we want to say to them that we will stand by them and mobilize very quickly in order to strengthen the links that we have with the population of Ukraine, and we will also be there to support their choices on their path, which is a European path. We have also had the opportunity to discuss the way in which Europe can embark upon the agenda of sovereignty. Let me quickly run through the three pillars that we have today set out in the declaration. We are looking to the future in this way to give an impetus to the European project, to make it a committed and robust one. First of all, we have the question of energy. This is not new today, this challenge of energy. We decided to embark upon climate neutrality by 2050, and the idea is to move towards greater independence while facing the humanitarian challenges. And there are a number of points that we want obviously to deal with. First of all, it's the question of prices and the impact for families throughout Europe and also for businesses. The question of dependence, which is too great. That's what we're seeing today, particularly our dependence on Russia. And we're pursuing that ambition. We want to release ourselves from that dependency so that we can act as best we can in line with our own interests, in line with our objectives, and obviously for the next winter we need a particular plan. Now, all of this is agreed on by the Council together with the Commission, which is going to be following up on our work here, and this is a very consistent agenda that has been initiated. Secondly, the question of defense and security. Defense Europe. We've been talking about this for a long time. Some progress has already been made, but there's no denying the fact that 2 weeks ago we woke up in a different Europe, in a different world. We can't deny the fact that the actions taken over the last few days, in fact, consecrated the emergence of a European defense. It has formally been initiated through the meeting today in Versailles. And we have now an operational strategy in which we will identify the actions and investments that are going to be necessary. We've also identified how it's going to be possible to roll out a European industrial base, taking on board the different challenges, that of cybersecurity, that of space, for instance, just to cite two examples. So there too, there's a timeline, an agenda that's been set. That is a mission for the Commission, and progress will be made further. Third point that I'd like to mention, the importance of consolidating our economic base. Europe is there to work in the interest of peace, security and prosperity. As an economic pillar, in other words. So it's up to us, it's up to our generation to take decisions today that are going to make that economic base far more robust, far more resilient. And here I can refer to what we've done in the area of health. We've seen with COVID how important it is to coordinate even further. There's also the ambition linked to the semiconductors, chips, raw materials, critical materials, and of course the vital need to continue to be committed to innovation, particularly technological innovation. So just in a few words, that's what I can say about these very significant decisions that have been taken today, and there's a real awareness shared by all of the leaders of Europe here in Versailles. We're all aware of the importance of the moment that we're living through and the decisions that we're taking, not just for tomorrow and the next few months, but for coming generations.
De ce projet qui a rassemblé l'Union européenne, la paix, la prospérité, la sécurité, et ce sont ces enjeux-là que nous voulons embrasser.
These are the challenges we must pick up so that we can see tangible results, more independence, more sovereignty, less fragility, and a greater ability to determine our own fate for the European Union. We'll have the opportunity to come back to the implementation of all of these measures because it's going to be European Council in Brussels in 2 weeks' time. We'll be taking a look at energy and other issues. We also intend, before the June summit, to have an extraordinary summit, which means that we'll be able to take a look again at security and defence. So once again, I'd like to thank President Macron for having brought us here today in Versailles at such a symbolic place, symbolic moment. It's the heart of European history. And yesterday and today, we came together to carry through this ambition for Europe. Thank you.
Merci Charles, merci Emmanuel, merci de nous recevoir
Thank you,
ici.
Charles. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you for hosting us in such a historic site. We're talking about the future of Ukraine and the future of the European Union and our democracies. And it is that history that is being written as I speak. Our destinies are linked. Ukraine is a member of the European family. Putin's aggression against Ukraine is an aggression, an attack against all the principles that we hold dear. It's an attack against democracy, against sovereignty of states, against the freedom of the people to choose its own destiny and shape its own future. The way in which we respond today to this odious attack by Russia against Ukraine will determine the future of Ukraine and also the future of our Union, and going beyond that, even the future of the entire European continent. So let us remain faithful to the principles that have been our guiding principles and our common responses to date. It's responsibility, unity, solidarity and determination.
This crisis has indeed made us face up to our responsibilities in the face of a new reality. First, our duty to continue ensuring reliable, secure and affordable supply of energy to European consumers. In the midterm, this means getting rid of our dependency on Russian gas by diversification of supply, by massively investing in renewables. Renewables are homegrown, they create jobs here in Europe. They are a strategic investment in our security and in our independence. And this is why the European Commission outlined Repower EU this week. Repower EU is a plan to diversify suppliers and switch to renewables. By mid-May, we will come up with a proposal to phase out our dependency on Russian gas, oil and coal by 2027, backed by the necessary national and European resources. But we also addressed energy price spikes. By mid-May, the Commission will present options to optimize the electricity market design so that it better supports the green transition. But consumers and business need relief now, and therefore this week the Commission came forward with guidance on price regulation in these exceptional circumstances and the possibility of a new temporary crisis framework for state aid to support struggling businesses. This is complemented by the option given to Member States to tax windfall profits from energy groups. And finally, by the end of this month, the Commission will present options to limit the contagion effect of the rise of gas prices to electricity prices. Finally, we need to be ready for the next winter, so we will set up a task force that will design a refilling plan for the next winter and coordinate the operation. Beyond this first step, the European Union needs to define a longer-term EU gas storage policy, and therefore the Commission will table a proposal to fill up underground gas storages to at least 90% of their capacity by the 1st of October each year. So you see, it's a whole big package, and this will be our insurance policy against supply disruption. Similarly, the leaders also discussed food prices and global food security. And here too the Commission will come forward with options to address these important issues. Putin's war has also fundamentally altered Europe's security environment. To defend Europe, we will need different forces and different capabilities. Significant additional defense investments in Europe will be needed, and I welcome that some leaders have announced ambitious steps to increase defense spending. More will follow. But we need to avoid fragmentation. Thus, we need a coordinated approach, because this only will ensure that we maintain a military technological edge in our European industrial base and that interoperability is given between our European armed forces. This will be the focus of our work in the next weeks to come. I want to be very clear that we need to closely coordinate also with NATO. NATO is the strongest military alliance in the world. Thus, I welcome that the leaders have tasked us to prepare an analysis of the defense investment gaps and to make sure that we have a clear plan how to deal with those gaps in Europe by mid-May, when the Commission is presenting the results of this undertaking. The second principle I mentioned was unity. It certainly guided us when we swiftly imposed altogether 3 successive waves of sanctions on the Kremlin. With an immediate, hard-hitting effect, we will now come forward with a 4th package of sanctions. These sanctions will further isolate Russia from the global economic system, increasing further the cost of Putin's invasion to Ukraine. And finally, a word on solidarity, which so many Europeans are showing shining examples of in these days by welcoming with open arms more than 2 million people who have now fled the war in Ukraine. I want to thank all EU member states, and in particular the countries in the front line, that is Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Hungary, and of course our partner Moldova. Because the people of Ukraine need and deserve all support, and so do the countries that welcome them. The Commission has set up a solidarity platform to coordinate operational and financial support and reception capacity. We're also using the flexibility of the EU budget to the fullest so that member states can finance actions for refugees, like, for example, housing or schooling or medical care and other topics. This flexibility within the Commission could free several billion euros over the coming years for exactly these purposes. The Ukrainian people are showing immense courage, and a people that stands up so bravely for European values is clearly part of the European family of nations. So while this terrible war rages on, we should already reflect carefully about what comes next. The membership applications of Ukraine are expressions of national sovereignty, of its will and its right to choose its own destiny. Today, we have opened the pathway towards us for Ukraine. They are part of the European family. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Monsieur le Président de la République, vous avez...
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente, Mesdames, Messieurs. Merci beaucoup d'être là et à l'issue de ce sommet de Versailles. Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente viennent parfaitement de refléter l'esprit de nos débats et des conclusions. Nous nous trouvons dans cette galerie des batailles. Et si d'aucuns pensaient que la guerre dans nos contrées faisait partie de l'histoire, depuis 15 jours, le choix de la Russie, du président Poutine, a été de faire revenir la guerre en Europe.
Russia and the President Putin was to bring war back to Europe. In the face of this and the unheard of violence of Russia against Ukraine and its population is a tragic turning point for our history. We're all aware of the fact that it's a turning point as well for our societies, for our peoples and for our European project. For the last 2 weeks, our response, ladies and gentlemen, this has just been said, we've responded through unity, rapidity and spirit of responsibility. Choices were made very quickly, all 27, with our institutions and coordinated with all of our partners in the context of NATO and G7. Diplomatic work has made it possible to isolate Russia, inter alia, recently at the General Assembly of the United Nations. For 2 weeks now, Ukrainian men and women have been fighting courageously to defend their freedom, their democracy, their sovereignty and the integrity of their land. Europeans have a clear position, unanimous and firm condemnation of the Russian aggression at all international levels, and we've drawn full consequences of this, inter alia with the resolution that was adopted at the General Assembly, support to Ukraine. Together, we've agreed to deliver hardware, not just humanitarian material, but also weapons. And we've proposed today that the European facility be added to the tune of some 500 million, which is going to allow us to go further in this line. Countries that in the past were traditionally neutral, Sweden, for instance, have decided for the very first time that for the first time in decades they would take an active role in the support to Ukraine. We also have economic support, humanitarian support. This will be continued. Some 2 million refugees have been welcomed. Madam von der Leyen has referred to this, and I'd like to thank the populations of the neighbouring countries, Poland, Hungary, Romania and Moldova as well. And obviously France will be playing its role, and I would hope that we will be able to have the necessary mechanisms of solidarity that can be used in this overall approach. As of the very outset, we also deployed massive, unheard-of sanctions, and this was done very quickly. Second, fourth, 6 days of conflict, they were marked by European decisions of these unprecedented sanctions. We're willing to adopt other sanctions, and all options are on the table. The point of our discussion is to prepare ourselves for these sanctions if they were able to call a halt to the attack and the aggression, and could prepare us also for the consequences in the coming weeks and months. Our initial objective is, of course, a rapid return to peace, starting with a ceasefire, followed by a rapid withdrawal of Russian troops. And that is why keeping up pressure on Russia, and we're also maintaining a very demanding dialogue, in particular in conjunction with the German Chancellor. So the support to solidarity for Ukraine is what kept us very busy, particularly yesterday. We support Ukraine today, and we will do that for as long as the war lasts. And we will be there for the reconstruction of this destruction brought about by Russia. We will be there to help it to stand up and stay standing. The message that we've sent out to the Ukrainian population is that the path to our Europe is open to them. Their fight for freedom and democracy, for the values that we all share, has demonstrated that Ukraine is indeed a member of our European family. We also want the applications made by Moldova and Georgia as well be examined in line with our treaty by the European Commission, so that the acceptability can be determined in line with the provisions of our treaty. The Versailles Declaration, the agenda of Versailles that we've been discussing today, is linked to the fact that sovereignty in Europe, which might have been thought of by some as a slogan or a sort of French fantasy, is seen by all today as being crucial. This sovereignty, strategy of independence has been there at the very start, also of the pandemic. We've seen what had to be done. It was there when we had to produce and deliver vaccines for ourselves and for other countries. We've seen it when we came out of the crisis, the start of the recovery, when we saw what was happening as regards the semiconductors, when we had delegated production to the other parts of the world, how difficult it was to return to the manufacturing of cars, for instance. And we're seeing it in the context of this crisis, where we can see how our food, our energy, our defense are all issues of sovereignty. We can cooperate. We want to be open to the world, but we want to choose our partners and not depend on any. That's what we mean by sovereignty. It's not protectionism. It's not a question of closing the door. It's a question of having the possibility of staying open without being dependent. So the Versailles agenda has set out the next few months' work along those lines. As regards defense, we want to be able to define the investments that we need. Several of us are already at the level of 2% of GDP invested in defense. Others have further efforts to make, but we're going to make coordinated efforts. We're going to identify our needs in budgetary terms. We're going to identify capabilities that are required. We'll also identify our needs when it comes to possible new conflicts, whether we're talking about shipping, maritime space, and also identify what we need in order to develop the European industrial tissue. If we're going to import more in the way of hardware from elsewhere, then there's not much point pursuing this sort of sovereignty. We need to think in terms of partnerships, yes, but we have to be able to decide to consolidate and to construct a defense industry with fewer standards, but corresponding to an integrated market. So the number of decisions that we've already taken
a fait des choix budgétaires massifs pour atteindre dès l'année dernière ces 2% d'investissement et pour relancer beaucoup de ces filières et de ces capacités. L'Allemagne a décidé, il y a un peu plus de 10 jours, à son tour de porter des investissements historiques pour son pays. Le Danemark a fait aussi un choix historique, celui de soumettre à son peuple dans quelques mois la possibilité de revenir dans le projet européen de sécurité et de défense. Vous le voyez, partout sur notre continent, des choix historiques sont en train d'être pris qui marquent un tournant majeur. Il nous faut l'organiser au niveau européen pour bâtir cette capacité commune en matière de défense. C'est l'objet du mandat qui a été confié à la Commission pour que d'ici au mois de mai, nous puissions, dans le cadre de cette rassemblement du Conseil extraordinaire et qui précédera le sommet le temps du mois de juin, de bâtir une stratégie européenne pleinement établie en matière d'investissement, de renforcement de nos industries de capacité. Ensuite, il y a le sujet de l'énergie. Nous avons d'ores et déjà, à travers la stratégie climatique qui est la nôtre, au fond, commencer à bâtir un chemin d'indépendance. Sortir des énergies fossiles, c'est devenir indépendant. Néanmoins, nous savions que sur cette route, pour beaucoup d'entre nous, la sortie du charbon en particulier passait par le gaz. Un gaz que nous importons et que nous importons encore de Russie. La situation que nous vivons aujourd'hui, celle que nous vivrons immanquablement demain, doit nous conduire à réévaluer cette stratégie en étant encore plus ambitieux sur le plan climatique. À cet effet, nous aurons un rendez-vous dès la fin du mois de mars où nous regarderons de manière très concrète comment d'abord accompagner nos peuples sur la question des prix. C'est le mandat qui est là aussi confié à la Commission, des options concrètes sur les prix, des options concrètes sur le remplissage. Ce sont des sujets très techniques, mais de quoi s'agit-il au fond? De permettre de garantir des mécanismes
so that we can guarantee their mechanisms, which means that we're not subjected to the contingencies of the market or speculation of the market in particularly crisis situations. Many of you have already taken steps to protect our citizens and companies, and we need to have European choices, and in the 2 weeks to come, we will do our best so that we can stand up to the price shock which comes from the geopolitical context. Prices were going up before the war, and they're continuing to increase because of the war. And of course, we have the sanctions which are coming in, and we must prepare ourselves so that we are not so sensitive to the dependency on Russia. And this is what we've scheduled for May for the Commission. As the two presidents have pointed out, we have the plan to step out of the dependency on fossil fuels from Russia so that we can get out by 2027 so that we are no longer dependent on Russian gas, oil and coal. That's by 2027. This means there has to be new investment, new facilities, so that we can support our choices for renewables and for nuclear energy. You can see that March and May will be very busy for energy subjects. And there are other issues that we will have to work together on to ensure that we are independent and sovereign. There's the food strategy.
Ou qu'il s'agisse du blé, du maïs,
whether we're talking about wheat or maize or grain crops in general, we know that Ukraine and Russia are two huge markets, and Europe is already being upset by the war on the food supply market, and this will be even more so in 12 to 18 months with the impact on Ukraine and crops there. And there will be a major disturbance to food supplies in feed supplies. So we have to strike a new balance and look at food production so that we can have autonomy for our food production and for protein production. And we must reassess the strategy for Africa because a number of African countries are going to be hit by famines in the next 12 to 18 months because of this war.
Souveraineté en ce qui concerne aussi d'autres matières premières, en ce qui concerne des matériaux rares, souveraineté évidemment, je l'évoquais, en matière de semi-conducteurs, de santé, je ne veux pas ici faire toute la liste, mais nous avons à travers cet agenda
I won't go through the whole list, but we have this agenda. We will be going through this in the months to come with very concrete proposals for investments which will make it possible to have more sovereign and more independent Europe. We will be
C'est l'objet de la taxonomie en matière d'énergie. C'est l'objet aussi d'un travail que nous devons accélérer pour parachever l'union des capitaux en européen et l'approfondissement du marché unique dans les différents secteurs. Deuxième point, il nous faut avoir une politique monétaire adaptée. Nous ne sommes pas revenus à des temps normaux, de manière évidente. Et la Banque centrale européenne aura à poursuivre le travail suite à ces annonces d'hier. Mais il est très clair que nous rentrons dans une zone de très forte tension due aussi au contexte géopolitique. Troisième levier, nous aurons des stratégies nationales d'investissement public pour nous protéger des conséquences de la guerre, pour financer notre solidarité et notre résistance à ces conséquences, mais financer aussi ces stratégies de souveraineté. Et quatrième point, il nous faudra aussi, en Européens, financer, comme nous avons su le faire pendant la pandémie, ces grandes stratégies que je viens d'évoquer. Et le faire parce qu'on parle d'investissement pour notre futur, que nous parlons d'investissement conjoint, que nous avons un intérêt à coordonner ces investissements et que nous avons aussi intérêt à financer cela en européen pour éviter toute fragmentation du marché financier et des dettes souveraines européennes. C'est la stratégie que nous allons commencer ici à travailler et qui va nous occuper dans les prochains mois. Mais là aussi, il nous faudra faire preuve d'unité, de rapidité et d'esprit de responsabilité. Les Ukrainiennes et les Ukrainiens nous donnent un exemple unique, celui du courage. Nous ne faisons pas la guerre, nous, Européens, aujourd'hui, à la Russie. Mais nous soutenons, comme je le disais, l'Ukraine, nous sanctionnons la Russie, mais nous devons aussi faire notre part et avoir le courage de prendre les décisions historiques, d'assumer le fait que défendre la démocratie et nos valeurs a un coût, que faire ses choix d'indépendance a un coût et suppose de revenir sur parfois des dogmes que nous avions depuis de nombreuses années, des organisations, des habitudes qui étaient les nôtres. Et je crois pouvoir dire que les discussions d'hier et d'aujourd'hui ont consacré la prise de conscience et la volonté des Européennes et des Européens ici à Versailles d'avancer dans cette direction. Et je finirai sur ces mots. J'entamais hier nos travaux en remerciant certains de mes collègues, et je le dis à Madame la Présidente de la Commission, car Versailles qui est un immense lieu d'histoire, que les Françaises et les Français aiment plus que tout et qui notre fierté à l'égard du reste du monde a aussi parfois été un lieu qui a résonné avec des défaites diplomatiques. C'est aussi le lieu où nous avons perdu la paix à la fin de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Et après avoir gagné la guerre, nous avons perdu la paix parce que nous avons à ce moment-là acté la volonté d'humilier et de diviser l'Europe. Et je suis très fier que durant ces 2 jours, malgré les difficultés, la gravité, la lourdeur, parfois l'émotion extrême qu'il y avait autour de la table, nous avons tous ensemble, de manière unanime, acté que le seul moyen de préserver la paix sur notre continent était notre unité. Et c'était le courage de cette unité. Et c'est le plus important à mes yeux. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je tiens à vous informer qu'on vient de publier notre déclaration de Versailles dans les 24 langues de l'Union européenne. It's published on our council website, the Versailles Declaration. And we're going to take a few questions in the room. Angélique Boin, de Radio France. Vous êtes la première qui va poser une question.
Ok. Bonjour Angélique Boin, la rédaction internationale donc de Radio France. Vous avez eu 2 jours de sommet, c'est la première fois que vous vous voyez aussi longtemps depuis cette guerre. Vous parlez d'Europe plus puissante face à Moscou. Vous nous parlez d'agenda, vous nous parlez de 2027, vous parlez d'éventuelles mesures sur sanctions, mais sur le terrain, on a vu cette maternité bombardée, Kiev est encerclée. Vous avez certes réagi vite et fort, on l'a vu, aujourd'hui ça ne suffit pas. Et quand même le sentiment qui sort de sommet, c'est que vous n'avez plus vraiment d'outils ni d'unanimité pour une mesure forte et rapide aujourd'hui, j'insiste sur aujourd'hui, de nature à faire plier Poutine. Alors est-ce que vous êtes quand même aujourd'hui impuissant?
Soyons clairs, il y a une guerre sur le terrain et nous ne sommes pas en guerre. Ce que vous pointez est vrai,
at war. What you've stated is true, but the political reality, the sovereign choice is that one, as I said, we are not at war. You're quite right to say that we don't have a response in a theater of war which was triggered by Russian aggression because we are not there in the theater of war. Have we excluded additional sanctions? Certainly not. The G7 statement, which will be issued in a few hours, will confirm additional sanctions, and then depending on what happens in the country, in Ukraine, we are not excluding other possibilities. Now, if things continue in the military way that you've just described, we may take further sanctions, including massive sanctions. But at this point in time, Europeans are intervening in three different ways. There are sanctions against Russia, and we'll take other sanctions. And if the circumstances require it, we will follow those sanctions to the very end. Then there's support for Ukraine, which we will continue to do. And then there's diplomatic action to isolate Russia at the United Nations and to convince President Putin to come back to the negotiation table in true sincerity with the President of Ukraine so as to find an agreement. This is the framework of our actions.
La plus grande fermeté, et je partage votre émotion quand nous voyons les scènes à Kharkiv, ou à Mariupol, inacceptables et odieuses que nous avons vues. Mais aujourd'hui, nous ne sommes pas, nous, Européens, sur le sol ukrainien en guerre.
The Europeans, we as Europeans, we are not at war in Ukraine.
Indeed, it is atrocious. It is atrocious, this bombardment of the maternity hospital, for example. And I think there needs to be investigations about the question of war crimes. Therefore, this has to be reflected and recorded soberly. But I would also support the fact, I mean, we are at day 15 of this horrible war. And as the President said, we were well prepared. On day 2, day 4, and day 6, we had each time a massive package of sanctions. Today, a week later, you see that the ruble is in free fall. It has lost more than 50% compared to the euro. You see that there are skyrocketing interest rates in Russia. You see a soaring inflation. The rating agencies do rate the Russian bonds as junk by now, and recession is hitting the country. This within 15 days. This shows the severity and the impact of our sanctions. And therefore, the fourth package will come. And as the President said, we have our way to answer to the atrocious aggression that Putin is showing, and we will be determined and forceful in the answer.
Thank you, Madam President. La prochaine question, c'est pour Agathe de BFM TV.
Agathe from BFM TV.
Bonjour, Messieurs les Présidents. Bonjour, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur le Président français, les 27 ont refusé une adhésion accélérée de l'Ukraine à l'Union européenne. Le Président Zelensky vous a immédiatement répondu. Il faut y aller plus fort, dit-il. Il vous demande d'en faire plus. Il demande à ce que les décisions des politiques coïncident avec les humeurs de leur peuple. Je voulais savoir comment vous vivez ces reproches qui sont devenus quasi quotidiens de la part de Kiev, et est-ce que l'adhésion de l'Ukraine est une chimère ou selon vous elle est réalisable et souhaitable?
For Ukraine is a dream, or is it really achievable? And I have another question.
Concrètement, s'agissant des sanctions, est-ce que vous avez décidé de réduire des 2/3 les importations de gaz russe d'ici la fin de l'année? C'est un projet porté par la présidente de la Commission. Et est-ce que l'équation n'est pas impossible à résoudre entre plus de sanctions et protéger le pouvoir d'achat des citoyens européens? Est-ce que vous ne redoutez pas une colère sociale et un nouveau mouvement type Gilets jaunes dans le monde?
Nous avons montré, en développant des mécanismes, que nous pouvions tout à fait prendre des sanctions et nous protéger collectivement contre les conséquences pour les consommateurs et les entreprises. Maintenant, soyons clairs aussi, le marché mondial des matières premières, en raison de la forte reprise, donnait lieu à une augmentation des prix avant la guerre.
was already going up in price before the war. That's for gas, oil, and other commodities or industrial components. There was already an increase in prices, so you need to make a distinction there. And the governments are not here to cope with all inflation. France, for example, has coped with a lot of inflation, and that's quite exceptional. Now, take the example of gas. With gas,
des sanctions et contre-sanctions.
We don't have a major impact on the crisis and sanctions, where the market went up by 40%. It only went up 4% for consumers because we had a shield in place. Now we're going to work on other European mechanisms too. So what I'm saying is that we think and we know that we have the wherewithal to impose sanctions and to cope with counter-sanctions and to protect our economies because we have the strength at a national level and at a European level.
Sur votre autre question, je pense qu'il nous faut avoir beaucoup de respect, de solidarité pour les Ukrainiennes et les Ukrainiens et leurs dirigeants. Et je comprends parfaitement l'émotion, l'attente qui est là. Ce que je veux dire, c'est que hier, le Conseil européen a exprimé un message fort et clair sur le destin européen et le chemin européen de l'Ukraine, sans ambiguïté. Maintenant, pouvons-nous avoir une procédure accélérée ou exceptionnelle avec un pays en guerre sans regarder aucun critère? La réponse est non. Pouvons-nous dire on abandonne ce faisant aussi la Moldavie voisine, si fragile, avec la Transnistrie, la présence des forces extérieures, la dépendance au gaz russe, des réfugiés qui arrivent? La réponse est non. Pouvons-nous, à raison de cette guerre, oublier le processus dans lequel sont rentrés depuis plusieurs années des États des Balkans occidentaux qui veulent nous rejoindre, qui sont aussi fragiles, qui sont touchés par les déstabilisations géopolitiques. Pour autant, la réponse est non. Et vous le voyez bien. Nous avons hier envoyé un message clair, politique et de cœur à l'Ukraine, disant votre chemin est avec nous, notre famille est la vôtre. Mais il nous faudra dans les prochains mois réévaluer très profondément ce qu'est notre Europe. Et je crois pouvoir vous dire que la géopolitique et le retour de la guerre et du tragique en Europe, le retour des révisionnismes historiques, des volontés de puissance et d'hégémonie, nous impose de réfléchir à comment nous voulons organiser une Europe large, qui n'est sans doute pas celle qui a toutes les politiques publiques qui sont les nôtres, qui n'est sans doute pas l'Union européenne telle qu'on la voit, qu'on la pense, qu'on la conçue aujourd'hui. Mais il nous faut stabiliser, embrasser beaucoup de pays qui sinon sont déstabilisés par l'islamisme politique, par les velléités russes, les intrusions chinoises à nos portes et nous déstabiliser. Cela imposera aussi de revoir notre manière de nous gouverner nous-mêmes et de nous organiser nous-mêmes. C'est d'ailleurs pour cela que nous avions lancé une conférence sur l'avenir de l'Europe. Cette conscience géopolitique accrue liée au contexte et cet exercice pour nous-mêmes que nous avions lancé doivent pouvoir converger d'ici l'été. Il nous faudra trouver des formes nouvelles de notre Europe, j'en suis convaincu.
Indeed, President Zelensky has, with his application, set a process in motion. And I just wanted to remind that from the day of the application to today, it was just a very short time that the Council tasked the Commission to form an opinion on this application. Normally, this takes years. So it shows that there is a completely different process going on. The process itself is important. As the President said, there are conditions to be part of the European Union that have to be met. But we are also aware of the fact that having a free and democratic Ukraine after the war will also mean that a lot of rebuilding the country will be done with strong support from the European Union too. So I want to emphasize that there is an enormous speed in the process over the last days, really to show that Ukraine is indeed part of our European family. On your second question on the two-thirds reduction potential reduction of Russian gas within a year. Indeed, this is doable. It's not a ban. It is a reduction by going, on one hand, in the diversification of the supply, so making sure that we have a lot more LNG coming to the European Union. And then it pays off that over the last weeks we've been working hard and have been calling all our friends around the world, and we have many friends around the world, that we need higher supplies of LNG gas. Thanks God we've done our homework and we have the LNG terminals. There have been investments, massive investments in the pipeline network throughout the European Union. So with the LNG terminals and an increased LNG supply, we're able to replace quite a part of the Russian gas. An example is the January. We never had so many LNG vessels and so high amounts of LNG supply to the European Union as in the month of January, because we just actively asked the other suppliers in the world. Then, of course, it needs to be accompanied by heavy investment in renewables, but also biomethane, for example, or increase in hydrogen. This will rise over the years. This is the beginning only. It's one of the most interesting projects to invest in the hydrogen, because whatever we do now with the LNG gas and the pipelines can one day be used as infrastructure for hydrogen. So it's a perfect transition into the hydrogen that will be one of the energy sources of the future. And then, of course, you can see in the communication that the Commission put on the table this Tuesday a detailed table with the different sectors where we can also reduce the energy consumption, thus reduce our dependency on Russian gas. Last but not least, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. And as I've already said, it needs the support by everybody. Everyone can do something, for example, by reducing the energy consumption we have overall. The individual contribution by 450 million Europeans makes a big chunk, if you look at that. And the combination of diversification, more renewables, and smart use of energy would make it possible.
Moi, je voudrais ajouter en quelques mots que les Ukrainiens aujourd'hui se battent avec un courage qui nous fait tous frissonner, qui nous impressionne tous. Ils se battent pour leur terre, ils se battent pour leur souveraineté, ils se battent pour leurs enfants, ils se battent pour leur futur, ils se battent pour appartenir au monde libre. Et fondamentalement, ils se battent pour les valeurs que nous portons au départ de l'Union européenne. Vous voyez qu'hier, il y avait autour de la table cette conscience totalement partagée par l'ensemble des leaders, qui est cette nécessité impérieuse pour nous, Union européenne, d'être aussi à la hauteur de faire preuve, nous aussi, de courage. Dans l'immédiat, ça signifie une capacité d'agir pour donner plus d'ampleur encore à cet accord d'association qui peut nous permettre immédiatement, sans devoir attendre une seconde de plus, d'engager, comme nous le faisons, davantage de moyens dans tous les secteurs possibles, compte tenu des circonstances. Et puis par ailleurs, il y a le processus. La réponse a été donnée sur ce sujet-là. Nous allons continuer au départ de l'avis qui sera rendu par la Commission. On a qu'à demander qui est introduit. Nous allons continuer à mener le débat au sein du Conseil de l'Union européenne sur ce sujet-là. Je veux vraiment vous dire que nous maintenons conviction, c'est un immense respect qui est ressenti à l'égard de la manière dont les Ukrainiens font une leçon pour défendre ces valeurs de liberté, ces valeurs européennes que nous portons. Je pense que nous devons aussi nous être très engagés pour entendre et pour porter un message qui rencontre cette aspiration.
John, from Bloomberg, you're next. John.
Hello, if I could ask a question in English, please, of all the participants. Actually, two questions. The first one is on refugees. The British government has announced measures to relax entry into the UK for Ukrainian nationals with passports. I wanted to ask you if this is enough for easing their entry in the country, and if you believe that the UK is now doing its fair share of the burden. And the other question on spending on defence and energy. What were the reflections on the idea of common debt? Was there a consensus, or is there division on this? Thank you.
Sur le premier sujet, je me félicite de l'inflexion britannique qui montre bien qu'il y avait quand même un problème, malgré ce qui pouvait être dit. Et je pense que personne n'aurait compris qu'après tant de déclarations fortes que nous partagions, le gouvernement britannique aurait continué d'appliquer les règles actuelles qui consistaient à ne pas accueillir des réfugiés ukrainiens qui voulaient rejoindre le sol britannique ou alors expliquer qu'ils devaient faire des centaines de kilomètres pour aller demander un visa. Donc c'est un début de pragmatisme qui commence à rapprocher les actes des déclarations. Je trouve que ça va toujours dans la bonne direction et peut-être qu'à un moment donné, ils correspondront en totalité et là, on pourra dire que ça marche bien. Donc il y a encore du travail, mais ça va dans le meilleur sens et je remercie le gouvernement britannique. Je pense que la lettre du ministre de l'Intérieur français était donc utile. Je souhaite surtout que les femmes et les hommes, ukrainiennes et ukrainiens, qui ont vécu l'horreur, qui ont traversé l'Europe pour rejoindre leurs proches, leurs familles, sur le sol britannique, puissent être traités dans les meilleures conditions, accompagnés. Nous le faisons évidemment sur le sol français, mais que nous puissions réduire au maximum tous les délais administratifs et d'usage pour pouvoir leur permettre de retrouver des conditions de vie qui ne sont pas normales, évidemment, mais les plus dignes possibles. Donc en tout cas, je remercie le gouvernement britannique de ce premier pas. Les prochains jours nous permettront d'évaluer si c'est suffisant ou s'il nous faut trouver des mesures encore plus efficaces. Nous avons, nous, dit aussi notre disponibilité pour accueillir à Lille ou dans d'autres villes une procédure administrative. Ensuite, sur les sujets de dette commune. Moi, je pense que la bonne stratégie, et nous l'avons vécu pendant la pandémie, c'est de nous mettre d'accord sur les objectifs. Et quand on est au clair et qu'on est d'accord sur les objectifs, alors les instruments suivent. Si nous commençons par les instruments en connaissant nos divisions, généralement ça ne progresse pas et on perd beaucoup de temps. Et donc notre dessein, c'est... D'abord, nous avons vu l'unanimité aujourd'hui. Unanimité pour dire qu'on a besoin d'investir en défense, souveraineté énergétique, souveraineté alimentaire, souveraineté technologique et industrielle. Le numérique, par exemple, aussi, que j'évoquais pas tout à l'heure, fait partie de notre discussion. Une fois qu'on a dit ça, on a donné des mandats à la Commission, on va faire le travail pour dire de combien on a besoin et évaluer ce que ça coûte. Et on va, par cette évaluation, voir ce qui peut relever du secteur privé, du secteur public. Et en fonction de cela, et de la rapidité qu'on va avoir, nous aurons le débat sur les moyens et les mécanismes. En tout cas, en aucun cas, il ne s'agit de dette passée, mais il peut s'agir de mécanismes qu'on a déjà activés, comme au moment de la pandémie. Mais ce sujet sur les instruments n'est là que pour servir les finalités. Il y a une unanimité sur l'objectif stratégique. Maintenant, les sommets de mars et de mai doivent nous permettre de préciser nos objectifs opérationnels, lesquels nous permettront de décliner les instruments qui permettront de les obtenir. Voilà comment on va structurer les choses.
That's how we're going to go through this. What your first question is concerned, indeed, we welcome this improvement for the Ukrainian refugees. This is a good step in the absolute right direction. As you know, we in the European Union already a week ago, we have activated the so-called temporary protection directive for the very first time in the history of the European Union. This gives all Ukrainians immediately residency rights, and by that, of course, access to the labor market immediately, access to schools, to medical care, to otherwise support, so that these poor, innocent people immediately find a home here and can get on to try to accommodate in the European Union. What the second question is concerned, indeed, I want to underline that it has proven right that we first define the priorities and the necessities to invest in them. And I want to recall that from the beginning of our mandate, we have defined 3 priorities. It's the European Green Deal, it is digitalization, and it is resilience. And throughout the pandemic, as well as now throughout this times of war that Russia is unleashing, they have proven to be the right priorities. The European Green Deal is absolutely necessary if we want to get independent of fossil fuels, mainly by Russia, supplied by Russia. The digitalization is of utmost importance to modernize our economy, which proves now to be the leverage against Russia's war machine. And resilience, of course, defense is a subtitle of resilience. And it is important, as the President said, that we look at all different tools we can then activate to make it possible that we advance in our priorities. This is, on the one hand, the European level, and there is as well the European budget as, for example, Next Generation EU. It is the national level, but we should also not forget the private level. And a good example how to activate all three levels and make the projects advance is now, for example, our CHIPS Act concerning the semiconductors. Here we push forward a crucial topic that goes for the digitalization as well as our resilience, that is our independence, with a European investment, a national investment, and triggering private investment.
Thank you. Angela Mauro from Huffington Post, you have the last question.
Okay, thanks, Baron. Two quick questions. What do you reply to Mr. Zelensky, who is saying he's disappointed from the Declaration of Versailles? He asked Europe to do more, and he says it's not enough. And then I wanted to know, when you say you're preparing another package of sanctions and you're ready to, everything else is on the table, is it on the table, an embargo of petrol and gas from Russia is on the table, or the exclusion of Sberbank and Gazprom Bank from SWIFT is on the table as well? Thanks.
Bon, sur la première question, je dis avec beaucoup de, encore une fois, de respect, de considération pour le président Zelensky et son peuple qui se bat. D'abord, que le message politique que l'Union européenne a envoyé hier depuis Versailles est un message clair. Nous avons donné l'hymne ukrainien ici même, puis nous avons envoyé un message politique très clair. Après, ce n'est pas un processus juridique. Pour toutes les raisons que j'évoquais précédemment en répondant à votre confrère et ce qu'ont aussi parfaitement dit le président Michel et la présidente von der Leyen. Et je comprends très bien quand on se bat avec courage comme l'Ukraine le fait. C'était la même chose quand la semaine dernière il était demandé d'avoir une no-fly zone, c'était la même chose. On voudrait beaucoup plus et encore une fois, nous ne sommes pas des belligérants au conflit.
But we are
Je veux
not
ici redire en tout cas notre
parties to the
détermination
conflict.
à faire tout ce qui
We
est
say
utile
that we are
pour que le
determined to do
conflit
everything
cesse
useful to
et
bring
que la
about
paix
an
puisse
end
revenir
to
en
conflict
Ukraine.
and peace
La
can come back to
perspective
Ukraine.
européenne, le chemin européen sont clairs pour l'Ukraine, nous l'avons
Path is a
dit.
clear one for Ukraine. We've made that point very clearly.
Notre volonté
Secondly,
de continuer à soutenir
our desire
l'Ukraine et
to
les
continue
Ukrainiens
to
est
support
clair et
Ukraine
nous le
and the
démontrons et nous l'avons
Ukrainians is
décidé.
clear. We've
Et
demonstrated it.
troisièmement, nous
We've
sommes prêts à
taken a decision on this.
sanctionner
Thirdly,
au-delà
we're
de ce qui a
willing
été
to
fait.
sanction beyond what has already been done.
Rien de ce que vous avez dit n'est interdit.
Nothing from what you've
Et je
mentioned
vais
is
vous faire une réponse où, à dessein, je
off the
préserve
table.
l'ambiguïté stratégique. Parce que je pense
Preserve
qu'elle est
the
bonne
strategic
et qu'elle nous
ambiguity
est
because I think
bénéfique.
it's good. I think it's
Des
beneficial to
décisions
us.
additionnelles seront prises
Additional
suite au
decisions
G7.
will be taken
Elles seront
following the
limitées.
G7. They will be
Mais
limited.
si la Russie, malgré ce qu'elle dit,
Russia,
malgré le
notwithstanding
président
what it
Poutine qui
says,
déclare
notwithstanding
je crois au
President
pourparlers,
Putin saying, I
qui déclare à
believe
ses
in
homologues les choses
discussions,
avancent, je sens que ça
negotiations, things
bouge.
are moving forward, I see that
Président
things
Poutine
are
auquel nous
changing.
reparlerons encore dans quelques heures
In a few hours' time, we'll be
en
talking
lien
to President
avec
Putin
le chancelier
again,
Scholz.
together with
Si
Chancellor
malgré cela, il
Scholz.
intensifie les
If,
bombardements,
despite that, he steps up
fait le siège de
the
Kiev
bombing,
et intensifie les scènes de guerre,
puts
nous savons
Kyiv
que nous
under
devrons prendre
siege,
à nouveau
then we
des
know
sanctions
that
massives.
further massive
Le
sanctions will
message
have
que
to
je
be
veux
taken
ici
by
vous
us.
dire, c'est que dans
The
ce
message I want to
cadre-là,
put across to you here is that
rien
in that
n'est
case,
interdit.
nothing
Rien
is
n'est
off
tabou.
the table.
Nous ferons
Nothing
tout ce
is
que nous
taboo.
considérons
We
comme
will
étant
do
efficace
whatever we
et
deem
qui a un
to
effet
be
utile
effective
pour stopper la
and
Russie
useful to halt
dans ce chemin
Russia
de l'agression.
in its aggression.
Moi, je voudrais ajouter que pour chacun des paquets de sanctions, on a systématiquement été capable d'être rassemblés rapidement chaque fois quand il était nécessaire d'agir. Et la réunion qui a eu lieu hier soir a encore démontré cette capacité à préparer ensemble en Européens et avec l'ensemble de nos partenaires. On voit que ces sanctions, elles ont un impact, elles ont un effet. Nous allons continuer à évaluer la situation pour prendre les décisions qui sont utiles pour infléchir les positions de l'Ukraine et ramener l'Ukraine dans un état d'esprit
bring it to a state of mind that will make it possible, we hope, for there to be a ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities as quickly as possible.
Merci beaucoup à tous.
Thank you.
Merci pour votre intérêt.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci, Mesdames et Messieurs.
President. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Merci infiniment.